people do a Kingston and NH, Kingston, New Hampshire search, it shows up as an oval with the town hall in it is the right thing to click on. And
Okay.
I believe it should be doing it right now.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this meeting to order at 6:32, we'll call it. I'm first going to run through the checklist, and at the end of that, we will do the roll call of board members and then open up the meeting with a little bit of instruction and then turn it over to the applicant for the presentation. So this is Kingston Planning Board, June 30, 2020. We have one item on the agenda, one hearing on the agenda, and it actually consists of two parts, but we'll get to that in a moment. First of all, I'm going to go through the right to know checklist just to verify that we're in fact in compliance by meeting in a remote fashion as we are. So as chair of Kingston Planning Board, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis and in accordance with the Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the Governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number, and that number is 929-205-6099. And the password is 420005. And all of this is on the legal notice for the posting. There's also the web address for this Zoom meeting that can be found on the town's website on the agenda, second page of the planning board's agenda, legal notice actually for this meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided on the Town of Kingston website at www.kingstonnh.org. If anybody has a problem, please email at pb@kingstonnh.org, and that email is being monitored during this meeting. So if you need to communicate with the hosts, you can do so that way. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at another time. And that is also one of the provisions under the emergency order for remote meetings. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. The meeting will begin by taking roll call attendance. When each board member, board staff, or other official states their presence, also please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Okay, so that is all of the material that we need to convey regarding the status of this meeting as being remote. Or virtual, I guess is the right word. Okay. I will do some comments on the meeting, but I think first of all, let's call the roll and get a tally of who's here for the board. Ellen, would you please call?
I froze a little, Glenn, but you all set for me? I'll assume we are.
Yes.
Is everybody else frozen?
Oh, no. I'm good. I can hear you and see you fine.
Okay, then it doesn't matter. So we're all set for the roll call? Glenn
Please.
Kopelman,
Yes, I'm present at my home with no one in the room with me.
okay, Peter Coffin,
Present and at home, no one else in the room.
Richard Wilson,
Home alone.
Lynn Merrill,
At my place of business, conference room, alone.
Chris Bashaw,
Present, home alone for the time being until my family gets back, but in Kingston.
Peter Baiki,
Present with my lovely wife, Tammy.
No dog?
Oh, he doesn't want to get involved with this meeting, I guess.
and Robin Duguay.
Present and alone.
Ellen Faulkner is also present and currently alone.
Okay, great. All right, thank you all. And just for the public who might be listening, I'm the current chair of the board. Lynn Merrill is the vice chair, and Glenn Greenwood is our town planner. Dennis Quintal is our town engineer. Ellen Faulkner is one of our board alternates and also our administrative assistant. And normally I would tell you who's a voting member tonight, but we won't be taking any votes tonight, so we don't need to do that. But we do have all 7 board members here, so if we were voting, Ellen would not be a voting member tonight, unless during the process of the meeting we ended up having a recusal. Okay, so we have, as I said earlier, we have one application. It's a public hearing. This is a design review application. And the important thing for folks who might be listening to this and not familiar with some of the planning board terms and processes, design review is a step that an applicant can take prior to submitting a formal application. It gives the applicant a chance to discuss with the board a potential project and get feedback and get some dialogue going back and forth before they actually come in with a formal application. Important that you all know that this is a public hearing, so there will be public comment taken, and I'm going to explain how we will do that in just a second. But also know that because it's design review, it's completely non-binding discussion between the board and the applicant. There are no votes taken, no decisions made, and this meeting cannot be continued to another time. It happens just tonight and then it's done. And should the applicant then choose to come back to the board with a formal application, the process would start all over again. If you happen to be an abutter to the project, you would receive certified mailings all over again for that process. So that's just a little bit of explanation of what design review is. We're going to go through our typical process of how we run a hearing with this planning board, and that is we'll give the applicant an opportunity to make a presentation to us all. Once that has happened, we'll open it up to the board and the board's staff to ask questions and have some discussion. And at some point after that, I will open it for public comment. The way we're doing public comment on this Zoom platform is that if you have a question to ask or a comment to make, we're going to ask that you do it in the chat function of the Zoom platform. And when you do so, we need to have your name and your address so that we have that for the record. And we have co-hosts, Ellen Faulkner and Glenn Greenwood are co-hosting this, and they're going to be monitoring the chat function and be able to get questions to me that we can then pass to the applicant. So with that, and if you're a member of the public and you are listening to this and you have questions as you're listening, just go ahead and type them right into the chat. You don't have to wait until we open it for public hearing. In fact, it would be helpful if if as you think of things that you ask questions or make comments, so that we have an opportunity to see them in advance, maybe have a chance to consolidate some of them if they happen to be the same kinds of question or about the same topic. Okay. So as I said, it's a public hearing. The project is located at 266 Route 125. It's tax map R41 lot 17-1. And it's actually a two-part application. The first part is a subdivision of the property. And the second part is a proposed development for a warehouse distribution center. And that would be under site plan review, but it's coming in as a combined package. So the planning board, if this were not just design review, if it were a formal public hearing, we would be dealing with subdivision and site plan review for votes. But the applicant is going to be talking about both of those components as they go through their presentation. All right. Glenn or Ellen, did I miss anything critical?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. All right. So who is speaking on behalf of the applicant? Is it Carl? It is Carl.
It will be Carl.
It will be as soon as he gets unmuted. There we go.
I think
All right.
I just got unmuted. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we also have Doug McGuire from your group as well.
Yes, Doug, I see him appearing and he just got unmuted. We work together.
So
And also there's a few other people with our team tonight.
okay. Well, maybe we could start by having you introduce them and they can sort of wave their hand and say hello to us.
Sure. Well, you just met Doug and I think you saw him a couple of weeks ago on another project. And Luke Hurley, I see him in a tile at the bottom of the screen, but it just has his name, L. Hurley. And I'm not sure if he's calling in on the phone or on the computer. You might want to unmute him so he can say hi, but he's a wetland soil scientist with Gove Environmental Services. Is there any way that you can unmute Luke?
I'm clicking to unmute him, but it's not responding.
Oh,
Luke, can you
might
try
have to-
unmuting yourself?
might have to unmute himself, yes. But while he's working on that, we also have Morgan Hollis, and he has just appeared there. He's the attorney for our client, who is the landowner. And Morgan, are you available to speak? You have to unmute yourself. Yep.
Hey.
Oh, there we go.
Yep. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so between Doug and Luke, if Luke could ever Luke, I think you just unmuted yourself.
He did.
Are you there, Luke?
Yeah, is it working?
Yes.
We can hear you. You have to speak up, though.
Okay, well, I can do that.
Well, it's got a lovely echo.
No, I took care of that, I hope.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And as the chair pointed out, my name is Carl, and we're with the Dubé Group, and we're surveyors and engineers, planners out of Londonderry. And this is a 112-acre parcel. And what I'd like to do is just share the screen, and I'm just going to share a few simple plates of views, not the whole 53-sheet set of plans or anything, but some overviews, if that would be okay.
Oh, I was hoping that you would do that because it's the best way for folks to get a good sense of what you're proposing.
Okay, so it says I cannot screen share while the other participant is sharing. So I think Glenn, it says, oh, okay. Let me try this again. share.
There you go.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is just pop up, just to get us calibrated. I hope everyone can see this. This is a zone map from the Planning Commission, and we screened it out to basically just focus on the C2 district, which is up here in the upper portion, and I can do an annotate. Glenn asked me to spotlight. Well, so you see in blue here, that's the C2 district, we believe, and it used to be basically our parcels with some parcels adjacent to us, and then I think the town opened the C2 district up across the street as well. But the C2 district is here up in the upper north portion of the property, flanked by Route 125, and what we're proposing are generally uses that are actually invited to be uses by right in the C2 district, and including warehouse, that type of thing. So we're going to be focused on that, obviously. And so I'm going to get out of this. We can always go back to that. There are some overlay districts, obviously, on the property. As you know, most of the town of Kingston it's in an aquifer protection district. We're in the Zone B, Bravo zone of the aquifer protection district, and we fully recognize there's certain criteria we have to hold and perform on in the aquifer protection district, and our site is up in this area, right up in there. You can see that on the plan. There are other overlay districts, obviously, as well that go into this. Basically, we're zooming into the site here. The 112 acres you can see here in green, yellow, pink, and blue. Those are 4 lots that we're proposing to subdivide with a host of cross easements interconnecting all of the lots. And this is in the C2 district. The C2 district basically is bounded on the right side by the town line with Brentwood, and then the Little River wrapping all the way around to the top of the screen, and also Route 107 on the left. That's all in the C2 district. There are some homes that are up front on 107. They're existing non-conforming, but they are there, obviously, and we respect that. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Along the bottom of the screen is Route 125. So as the chair pointed out, this is a 2-part hearing, and we're going to probably talk about both at the same time, if that's okay with the board.
Sure.
So the existing property, we did a full survey on this. We've done a lot of mapping, a lot of soils, wetlands, species, historic, archaeological. We've done a lot of that work. The existing, what people call the Sears Distribution Center, is here, and we'd like to subdivide that off in what we call the yellow lot, and that's a 12-acre lot with frontage on 125 and cross easements for a planned access package with all the lots. We're also proposing in the pink lot peeling that off, which is an existing building, 22,000 square feet. That's a 5-acre lot, the pink lot, all again with integrated access and redoing all the drainage and everything else in septic and water supply. And that existing building would be retained as office. And then we have up front, which is a bluish lot here. And that lot is also a 5-acre lot along the front. And we have proposed C-store fueling area, gas station for that. And then the rest of the green lot, the remaining of this is about 90 acres. And that would be where the warehouse would be situated. So that's sort of the overview of where we are. And I believe these plans have been posted on the town website. They were submitted. I think you guys have 11 by 17 copies, maybe full-size copies as well. But this is a color render, a very simple site rendering of the project. So we have the anchor, which is the proposed building here, 800,000 square feet with loading docks and slips. There's a small employee parking lot in the front. We have a planned access management package along with off-site improvement package on 125, which we will be coordinating with NHDOT, obviously. We have the existing warehouse building, which you can see right here, and then the office building here. And I'm going to just zoom in a little bit, just give you a quick overview. So in terms of master planning, we would have a major access point here, and hopefully you can, I can actually draw, I think. So a major access point here. There's also a minor access point, which we're looking at here, a right in, right out, and it might be just a right out. We're not sure yet. And this is why we're having a hearing to just talk preliminary, non-binding, and get feedback from the public, from the board, and start that process, start working with the town staff, engineer, et cetera. We also have another access point here. The site off to the left, you see these woodlands right here. I think this is an aerial that's a few years old, but the Bresnahan self-storage site, which I know you guys are familiar with, is located off to the left side here, and then even down further off the street, the sheet, is the retail plaza that you guys have been working on. So on the existing building, it's an existing warehouse, and it's been around a long time. I'm trying to get the so this building, you won't be able to see that. This building here. What we're doing is since we're doing a comprehensive site plan, we're improving the site on the existing building, and we're improving the drainage, we're improving the septic on this facility, we're improving the access around the building because there's no access around the building. So we're doing all of that with a managed access plan, so we peel off the two buildings here. There's a little connector in between that existing. We'll take that down, and we'll create this other lot here with the office building here, this location that's existing. So both of these two buildings are existing. We have a convenience store, gas station, and fueling area all along the front here, all interconnected and managed. And Doug is here to talk about the drainage on this and AOT criteria, and also DOT criteria. We have the warehouse facility here, this access way along the front also. I'm running out of colors. In here, and with a guard facility here, security, that type of thing. And we have what we call cross docks on both sides of the project. I'm gonna go to my mouse, zoom out. This building has full access. I'm hearing an echo now. All the way around. Do you guys still hear that echo? Oh, guess not.
Not now.
Okay, thanks.
It just
And
went away.
we also have a planned access to Route 107 along the back, and we can talk about that as well. We realize that there's some pinch points in this area next to an abutter, and we need to be probably there's a regulation on the 20-foot setback at a minimum for this property here, and we believe that we can actually design this area to meet those criteria. We're also in the shoreland district, so let me get into, I'm going to dive right into just some of the other overlay districts, if you don't mind. Get rid of some of these scribbles. So we submitted landscape plans, we submitted impervious area plans, and just basically on the whole project, the impervious area on each lot is, we're allowed up to 60% if we design proper drainage treatment and recharge practices into this project, and that's by zoning. Overall, on average, we're at 50% impervious, and each lot is broken down in the calculations there. So one is at 60%, the other one's at 49, 26, 56. So the aggregate actually over the whole thing is about 50%. So we meet the impervious criteria on that, just to get you a sense. We have shoreland areas, which we'll also get into detail if you want. Any of this, we can get into any amount of detail. I just want to give an overview here. So the shoreland district, as you all know, is this is the local shoreland ordinance. And that is basically it's a 300-foot setback off. We actually conservatively called it off the edge of the wetlands that are associated, the main wetlands that are associated with Little River, but actually so that's a conservative 300-foot swath. We can actually go to, a mean high water or something similar to that, but we just flagged all the wetlands and we're taking that swath. So there's a 300-foot deep swath all around the back side of this property, all the way around to the right. And the existing buildings, part of the existing buildings are existing non-conforming in there, and we're showing those. We've delineated all the little chunks and areas of the vegetated buffer setback, the 150-foot building and septic setback, as well as the 300-foot outer limits of the project. So each one of these areas means something, and we put that into a spreadsheet because we need to make sure that the project meets the criteria for the ordinance. And our intent at this very preliminary stage is to actually obviously meet the shoreland ordinance. So as we go forward in this design, and if we're moving things around and tweaking things and adjusting things, which I'm sure we would, all this data would be updated to make sure that we would be meeting the criteria for impervious, all the required setbacks. There's certain things that the board could approve if we're doing a good job with the drainage, et cetera, for access around perimeter areas. We do have a pinch point here to get to 107 with this access way here, this driveway, and we can work on that. There are provisions in the ordinance that allow us, if we're doing a good job with the drainage design, et cetera, is to work within the buffer there if it's related to access. But for the most part, we're staying out of it, and at least we're meeting the intent of the ordinance with all the data. And we will continue to update all of this as we move forward with design and gaining your input. So that's the intent of the shoreland ordinance. This property is not subject to the shoreland provisions of NHDES, although we are very familiar with those provisions. Your ordinance actually has a lot of those components embedded in it in terms of performance and function, and we would be honoring that, of course. We also have the septic load on this property, really, the required load for what we're proposing is very actually minimal. There's an existing septic system that was pre-approved by the state many years ago, about 3,700 gallons a day off the backside of this warehouse. We don't need all of that flow, and we would be replacing that system and improving it. We have the preliminary calculations here for that system. It'll be less than about half of that, and that's more than enough. We also have the office facility, which would get its own septic system, new, and that'll be about 1,100 gallons a day. This is all per state and town standards. There's a C-store facility, which has different components to it, and that septic would be out front here on its slot as well. And we have the preliminary calculations for that, and that's about 2,800 gallons per day. We also have the warehouse. If I'm going too fast or too slow, let me know, because I didn't want to drag this down. We have the warehouse with its new septic system, meeting all the state and town criteria, and we're assuming about 150 employees at the warehouse, and we did a worst case scenario at a 24-hour flow of three 8-hour shifts, which is 450 equivalent persons in a 24-hour period. At warehousing at the rates that the state requires us to do, it's about 4,500 gallons. So we realized that 2 of these systems, even though they're relatively small systems, they do invoke what the planning board could consider something that we would have to do a full design on, which we would do, by the way, but also a hydrologic study for those systems that are over 2,500 gallons, I believe. And I think Andrea is on with us, so she could probably fill us in a little bit more on that. But we'd be happy to do those studies if the planning board needs us to. We have no problem doing that, and we know that we could perform on that. In terms of water supply, we show a full water supply as appropriate per state standards for each one of the uses. There would be a new one out back here with a full, should be done to state standards, also NFPA standards and the expectations of the Kingston Fire Department. We would have a public water supply system here. We're not going to be taking water out of the river for that, obviously, and a facility out back for NFPA provisions. The water system would be looped around the entire property, obviously.
All right.
Cover a couple other items. We did provide full site plans. You'll probably see that, we tried to do a good job, thorough job, even though this is conceptual. We wanted to make sure that we were doing our homework, and we still have a little bit more homework, obviously, to do. And we're going to be integrating your input and everything, but the facilities, the layout, this is all a facility, industry standard items here. We're actually not at liberty to disclose the ultimate users of the property at this time, but that would be forthcoming. But the site layouts, all the things that you would expect for circulation, for geometry, for widths, for parking, islands, landscaping for that matter, all of that criteria is in here, and we probably over-designed a lot of this just to have placeholders for it. We've over-designed actually quite a bit on the drainage, as a matter of fact, and Doug can get into that. We do have also full grading utility plans at a preliminary basis, which basically shows the grading and the routing of certain stormwater practices and components. We have placeholders for a lot of treatment systems on this project, and Doug can get into that. We would be doing AOT, DES pre-application meetings. We would be inviting anybody who wants to show up to those meetings over at the state. Be looking forward to working with the town engineer and staff and anybody else, neighbors. We also have a corridor improvement plan on 125 that we've been looking at. We might also have some improvements on 107 at this end of the C2 district. So what I'd like to do is, am I going too fast?
Oh, you're good.
Okay. What I'd like to do is hand it over to Doug. So what I'd like to do is have him talk about the corridor improvements that we're looking at just generically on Route 125. And I'd like him to actually touch upon some of the drainage and the treatment practices that we're doing on the project as well. So if that's okay, I'd like to open up a typical corridor improvement plan. And Doug, I don't know if you're unmuted yet. Let me find it. Doug, you're there?
He's not unmuted yet. There we go. Yep.
Thank you, Carl.
Now, Doug, can you, do you want me to unshare, or can you jump on this? I'm not sure if you can or not with Glenn controlling, but if you need it, you can take this and start highlighting things. If not, I'll try to follow along with you.
I'm not seeing the same prompts, Carl, to allow us to, for me also to utilize. So I think I'll let you just kind of walk them through as we go. But basically what we looked at this conceptual level was improvements that would be required for this type of a development, and incorporating the understanding of what we have for an existing roadway on 125. So obviously we have a higher speed roadway. So we made sure that we had appropriate left turn pocket tapers. So we have appropriate deceleration areas where Carl's highlighting right there. And that's in addition to the queuing areas that we would have for the left turn pockets. So you can see that we have a larger one for the truck entrance to accommodate the queuing of additional trucks. So right there, as you see, is highlighted. We have an ability for a truck to be able to decelerate and then also be able to wait in queuing. And then we have an exclusive left turn pocket for the use of the existing warehouse building. And then also as part of this, we did exclusive right turn pockets which would be on the right side of the road coming in on both entrances. And these right turn pockets are good for also for deceleration and allowing for the vehicles to get out of the main flow of traffic and slow down and make the proper turns. We have large radii entrances that you would see on a scale of this type of truck use, large radii available. And then we also did a acceleration lane leaving the site that you'll see on the left-hand side coming out of the main driveway. And that's where Carl's highlighting right there. Carl, you're doing a good job following me here. I appreciate it. But that area right there is designed to DOT standards, the proper taper lengths that would be required for a road of this speed. And so that would allow for these vehicles to successfully get out into the traffic and get up to speed and successfully merge in a safe manner. So obviously these improvements could change slightly based on the locking down of exact users and exact traffic requirements, and then also with feedback of DOT. But that's just, we feel that that's going to be something, it's going to be something comparable to that level of improvement going through.
So Doug, this is designed to be at speed, at those highway speeds, correct?
Absolutely, yes. And, you typically wouldn't see the level of taper, and you can see that there's pockets to allow for these vehicles to move into the left turn lane out of the main travel lane and start slowing down and come to a stop, and assuming that they may need to wait for a moment or two to have opposing vehicles out of the way so they can successfully make the turn into the site.
And can you talk about what warrants are and how that works with these geometries, even a signal package?
Yes. So with final traffic design and analysis, and again, this is all would be coordinated directly with the DOT, and we have started preliminary discussions with DOT just so they're aware of this. But essentially what there is based on the existing traffic flow on the main line, you're going to have warrants of which you look at the left turn warrant, which would be the need for an exclusive left turn pocket. We're just basically almost guaranteeing that we are going to need that, so we're showing that. Same with the right turn warrant packaging. So there's a need whether or not you need to just do a taper into your site or whether you need a true exclusive lane for the right turns. And in this layout, we're assuming that as well. There's also the third component, which we're not currently showing, which would be the signalization warrants. And those are in 4-hour, 8-hour, and peak hour warrants. And so those would be reviewed based on, again, actual traffic counts at the intersections. And obviously, if a traffic signal were to be warranted by hitting those traffic warrants, then obviously that would be something that we would be incorporating into our design work.
Okay. And then let's jump over to a little bit on drainage, just to touch upon that. Let me find that mouse. Well, we did, Wayne in our office here plotted a composite grading utility plan that we started with here. You can see this in a lot more detail on the plans that were actually submitted, and you can actually zoom in onto those online as well. But this is sort of composite that we can kind of pan around on.
What I'll do in discussing this is basically kind of speak in a general overview sense, even though this plan does show a lot more detail than that, and then we can kind of dive in a little bit. Obviously, on an improvement to a site of this magnitude, you're going to have a very strong consideration for drainage controls, because we're adding a significant amount of impervious area to a very large site. Fortunately for this site, and I think incorporated in our design, we have many areas to incorporate drainage improvements, both for treatment and for mitigation of the peak runoff. So what we work to do in looking at this site, Luke Hurley, the wetland scientist and soil scientist, performed a number of test pits on this site to determine what the type of soils we had on site and where the water table would potentially be to rule in or out the potential types of improvements that we can propose. We have some areas, overall the site is very well drained. We have some nice sands and we have very, I would say, unusual for New Hampshire, deep water tables, upwards of 6-7 feet in several areas. And so what the goal would be to address drainage on a site like this would be to utilize the areas that have the high separations to water table and also just natural large separation areas based on the topography. And so what we'll have, Carl, if you could pan over just to your parking lot area where we have that little natural ravine on the left side. So what you'll see here is where his cursor is, we have a natural grade depression there where there's almost just a natural low area. And in those low areas, we're obviously not gonna, the parking lot's gonna all be at the same grade. So we'll be able to put in some very large diameter, either pipe or what we've been using a lot is large oval or half moon chamber systems that have a lot of capacity for promoting infiltration. And so in those areas that we can infiltrate, we will. And we'll be able to lose a very significant amount of the proposed large square footage of the roof into those areas. And the nice part about that is that you have areas that, the roof water obviously not getting the same type of environmental impacts as maybe as the parking lot would be. And so you're getting a natural cleaner water that we're going to be able to promote and infiltrate to offset that large roof area. And then what we have in areas where we may not have the separation we want to meet treatment criteria for an infiltration practice, we have very, very large ponds that we're proposing. These are open ponds. Open ponds are the best option for a site of this size because you get the best bang for your buck on capacity. And you'll see, we have very, very large ponds. One that Carl just highlighted there is a very large capacity pond. And what we'll likely do is we'll use some of the standard AOT accepted drainage practices for these areas. And the nice part is we can kind of work with the natural grades and the natural elevations of water tables in what we propose. So some of these areas we may do as a potential wet pond, which is a pond which provides its treatment through dilution. And there's a permanent pool which is held in these systems. And then we may also utilize surface sand filters as a filtration practice. And all of these practices would do a very appropriate job of mitigating the peak runoff as well as treatment of the stormwater. Now, where Carl is right now, we talked a little bit about the C-store and gas station. That area would be handled differently from the rest of the site. That would be considered a high load use due to the sale and of the petroleum products and the potential for petroleum to be on the surface of the drainage area, which could be collected. And for that reason, we have very specific types of designed ponds which we utilize for treatment, and there would be no infiltration proposed in those areas. AOT, Alteration of the Terrain Bureau at DES, actually prohibits you from utilizing any infiltration practices with a high load use, and we would obviously abide by those requirements. And so in this design, we're accounting for the fact that we would not be infiltrating within the C-store area, and those areas would be handled separately and different from the remaining areas of the site. So, I know that's a lot to throw at you guys all at once, but the the general overview here is that we are going to be able to accommodate infiltration, which is key to a site of this magnitude. If you have really terrible soils where you can't get any infiltration, it's very difficult to store the amount of water that a site like this would potentially produce during these record storms that we're designing for, which would be all the way up to and including potentially the 100-year storm. So the fact that we have good soils on site and good separation to water table is a very good sign in allowing us to be able to recharge water. And where we don't, we do have large capacity areas that we're dedicating to drainage to be able to have that storage that we need for a site of this size.
And Doug, can you talk a little bit about AOT criteria, any special criteria? We also have aquifer protection overlay here in town. So we would be meeting that criteria, the separation. Can you talk a little bit about also the practices, different treatment, pre-treatment, treatment train practices that you would be anticipating on this design?
Yeah, absolutely. So in more specifically, when I say treatment, there are a few different levels of treatment. What the state requires and what we would be implementing on a site like this would be, there's first that first flush pre-treatment level, and that can be handled in what would be considered a sediment forebay, or also also potentially including multiple types of pre-treatment practices to treat areas of particular concern, maybe large areas of truck circulation areas or storage. What we can do is we can provide a number of items, and actually that's kind of what we're proposing in our design. And so what you have is the first line of defense would be to do offline catch basins with deep sumps. What that will allow for is for you to include what they call an enviro hood within the system, within the actual catch basins themselves. And so what that does is that's an oil water separator and a grease trap right built into the catch basin. And so if you get small spills or debris, trash, all of that is collected right at the catch basin. Then what you can do as a belt and suspenders opportunity is to put in some form of a water quality unit, which is a more in-depth oil water separator and sediment reducer, because it basically allows for the water to flow through a device to allow suspended solids to fall out, and also for hydrocarbons or petroleums to float and be collected within the system. From there, we're going into some of the treatment practices that I mentioned, which would be the infiltration practice itself. If we're using infiltration, we're going to be making sure that we have at least 3 feet of separation to the water table, so that we're not introducing that water directly into the water table. We're allowing it to go through the natural soils, which would be a filtration practice as it gets naturally infiltrated into the soil. So that's a really good process, and that's why we're trying to maximize that as much as possible on this site.
Now, is that 4 feet in some areas?
So with AOT, they do look at the presence of certain groundwater protection areas. In review of this site, this site was not. I understand that it is in your aquifer protection zone, as much of the town is, but there was no categorization for this being in the groundwater, any type of a groundwater overlay zone. There was some existing wells, actually one of them of which is on our site, which are considered community water supplies. And anytime you have a community water supply on the site, that does kick in some additional provisions in that area. And so, and those provisions basically extend the requirements where you would typically have, say, 3 feet separation to water table. They bump that up to 4 feet of separation to the water table. And so on this site, we do have, I would say about half the site is encumbered by some of these well radii. We have the existing courthouse, which is a community water supply technically. And then we also have an existing 55 plus, what is it, Kings something, Carl?
Over here.
Landing.
Kings
Landing.
Landing, yes, thank you. So we have those two properties of which we have large radii that would extend onto our property, which would kick in these extra provisions from a drainage standpoint. And so we were aware of those, and we would be designing to accommodate those items.
Okay, thank you. And then I'd like to probably wrap it up so that the board can start in with us. But I'd just like to point out a couple items. In the submittal that we made, we have two, we're not going to go through all these items, obviously, but on sheets 2 and 3, we have zoning compliance items. So we took the ordinance section by section and subsection and tried to outline what was applicable and how we met that criteria, even on just an overview standpoint for the preliminary application for non-binding. And so there's a whole sheet of compliance notes on there, as well as the next sheet, which is the site plan regulation notes, subdivision regulations, fire protection regulations, septic regulations. Our intent is, positive and to try to be thorough. And I realize out of, 300 pages of regulations and overlays and everything, there's going to probably be some hot spots on a project like this of this complexity. And so we look forward to, working with the board and staff and their consultants and, the abutters in going through all of these regulations and understanding, our intent is to be by right. If we need some waivers, we would have to, explain those. But there might be a few items in here interspersed depending on how they're interpreted. Our intent is genuine and positive. We just want to provide good tax base. The master plan talks about the C2 district, talks about the uses. The ordinance and the regulations are good guidance for that. And our intent is to follow those. And if we do need some relief, then we would be pointing that out, or someone would point that out to us, and we worked through that in a positive, in organized fashion. I'll give you just one example, and that is, and we actually showed this as a little case study example. We submitted two separate site lighting plans. One site lighting plan is what we call by right, and it meets the site light pole height restriction. And the other plan is an example with notes on it that basically say on a facility like this, a warehouse facility like this, typically the end users that we work with at this scale want site light poles that are a little bit higher in height, and that would technically mean that you would need a variance for that. So we wanted to demonstrate to the board that we could indeed create a site lighting plan that met your lighting ordinance. So we would not have to go get a variance on that or ask for a variance, even though we have 0-foot candles where we're supposed to have them. But again, that's just something that we thought was important, and someone would be looking at that. Our landscape plans, even on a preliminary basis, our intent on the landscape plans, we didn't show every little square foot and every shrub and tree count, but our intent was to provide the necessary required landscape per your regulations. There's a pink arrow that keeps showing up here. I'm not sure how to get rid of it, but and we're going to be working. We'd like to work with the abutters and the town on landscaping and those elements. And I know that's going to come up. We have a heavily landscaped site in the front here. Obviously, we don't have to go into every little component of that, but our intent is to make something that we can be proud of in Kingston on this project. And the other item is impact fees. There's no impact to the school system, obviously, but there's about 54 or 50 cents impact fee for the fire department per square foot. Just this building alone would be about $420,000 of impact fee. In the master plan, it talks about optimizing a tax base. We believe that we are doing that. We believe that we'll deliver this in this district, in the C2 district, and still make sure our design meets the criteria for performance, especially the drainage and treatment performance. So I think that's about it. I mean, we had some other sheets here. Obviously, you saw some other plans. So I think I'm just going to leave it with this plan here. And we just are looking forward to meeting with the board. And we did reach out to a few abutters. We did not have success in their responses, but that's okay. We understand it's life. But we just want to let everyone know that we do have an open door policy on this. We want to do a good job. We will do a good job. And it's a good start. And we'd like to move forward on it pretty quickly. We submitted this back, I think, the day before Valentine's Day. And, we've all been through a lot, every single one of you and everybody on this virus stuff. Now it's here, we're almost in July 4th, and we're just now getting together. We're happy about that. And we'd like to continue with that.
Okay, Carl and Doug, thank you very much for the overview. I suspect that as we go through some of the questions, you might want to be bringing up a specific sheet to use it as an example or to point something out, but we'll see how that goes as we go through the discussion. Just a quick note, Glenn and I have been watching the comments as they're coming in. There are actually quite a few from public, and so we will go through those, but I want to give the board and our planner and our town engineer a chance to ask questions or make comments. And then we do have 2 town department comments that, well, I could do those right now. They're pretty quick. And keeping in mind that, of course, it's design review, these comments, you sort of have to, it's based on what they've seen. So from the health department, it's a comment regarding how you did the calculation on gallons per day for the septic on the food service part of the site, and he notes here that if paper is going to be used for a survey, you can use 20 gallons per day, but if it's not paper, it's got to be 40 gallons per day based on the state requirements. So that's just something to be careful of that he wanted to note.
Yes.
And then the fire department provided a comment sheet with 4 quick comments. And really, these are just sort of alerts to you as you're going through this, that you're going to need to comply with NFPA codes.
Yes.
Obviously, you need to comply with town ordinances. The fire department would require Knox boxes for emergency access, and I'm sure that you're used to dealing with that typically. And the fire department would also want to utilize third-party review on behalf of the town for all life safety issues, and the town's entity to do that is SFC Corporation.
Yes, we're familiar with their fire department. Actually, they're fire protection engineers over there, and they're very good, and we work very well with them.
Okay, all right. So those are the only town department comments we have at this point. I suspect that if this were in fact the final submittal, there would be a lot more detail and a lot more comments. But given that it's design review, we have those 2. So Glenn or Dennis, did you have, before I open it to the board, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
I have a couple things I'd like to say, but Dennis can go first if he'd like.
Yeah, a couple of things I'd like to point out is on the 107 access point out in the back, there's a large detention storage area there that's kind of like it's in the buffer zone. And I kind of wonder if Kyle could take a look at that and possibly not build that detention area there, have the drainage from that access way go back into the project, I think it can be done, but maybe you can take a look at that.
Dennis, I agree with you on that. We had a placeholder for that, and you notice we don't have a 4-bay on there either.
Yeah.
And I think we're just chasing ourselves. And when we got done with it, we're like, well, I think we can do something different with that, and we absolutely can. And that's very keen of you to point that out. We agree.
So a lot of the other detention areas will have to have outlet devices, and that's going to impact your 75-foot buffer zone in a number of areas. So that's something to make the Conservation Commission and the rest of the board aware of. There's going to be more impacts to the 75-foot setback vegetated buffer. And I do notice that on the compliance section, it did say that that you acknowledge the fact that there's a 100-foot buffer based on the wetland buffer section 2022B. But now I see that you're only protecting 75 feet. So perhaps Luke or whatever can, on your submittals, be able to justify the 75 feet instead of 100.
Yes, Dennis, that's a good point. And as we go into final design, obviously you're an experienced engineer. You can see these, and there are butters that are, and planning board members here that are experienced. We can tweak all of those areas and still deliver on this project and improve those items that you just talked about.
Yeah. And the only other thing I'd like to point out that I was looking at was on near the 125 side of the property, on the south side, the stormwater basins there, it looks like they're going to be wet ponds, looking at what the water table is there, but perhaps you're going to do something different. But it's going to be challenging at that point to find a place for them to an outflow for them. So you probably are going to have to traverse through, have the overflows go through the abutting properties with easements or whatever. But I noticed that might be a little challenge for you too. So anything else, I think you're going to, for me, I think it's just a matter of you providing your design plans, and I can take a look at it at that point. So I don't need to take any more time right now unless there's other questions to me.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Glenn?
Yes. So first, I just want to say we've met a few times actually with the design team on this through the technical review committee process. And I think it's important to note that for a design review hearing, this has to be the most complex set of plans we've ever seen with this kind of to thank the design team for the work that I know that they've put into this already. A couple of areas that I am just really concerned about, and I don't feel like we have a good understanding, really relate to the traffic generation of the site. I think that you're giving us some information on number of employees, and I just think that the scale of this seems like those numbers aren't complete yet, and that could very well be the case. So I'm interested. I know that you understand that we'll be looking for a traffic impact study for this proposal, and I know that you've had this proposal for a long time already. So I look forward to seeing that information. I did want to also say that in those technical review committee meetings, the chief of police was really, he was pretty forceful in his concern about that convenience store gas station proposal up front as being something that adds a lot of complexity and traffic concern that maybe you don't want to actually go through for this proposal. So I know that as you go forward, if that information is still on the plan, you're going to hear a lot more from the police chief about that issue. And finally, just looking at the layout, I think that the subdivision concept is a good idea for this. And it then allows you these construction pads that will be very helpful for whoever's going to develop it. So I understand that. When you look at the parking areas, especially back for the really large site, we have some shade tree requirements within the parking areas that haven't been addressed yet. And so I just wanted to make sure that you take a look at those and incorporate those in the next set of plans that you provide to us. That's where I'll end up with Michael. It's definitely gone into this plan, and I appreciate the efforts that have been taken thus far.
We'll continue, Mr. Chair, we'll continue to work with Glenn on that. I think I know where he's coming from on the shade tree requirements, and we just had some questions and on that, on the parking areas versus truck areas and how that's interpreted. But we certainly, we like shade trees. We have one of the few licensed landscape architects on our staff, because we don't say we're landscape architects for nothing. We mean it. And we put care into our plans on that. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that as we come through with this product.
Okay. Glenn, was that it for now for you?
Yes, thank you for the time.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to the board. I'd like to use my prerogative as chair just for a couple of quick things that I made note of for Carl and Doug. One is, and Glenn, you might have to help me with this. The site where the restaurant or food service is combined with fuel service. The food service, I believe, is a permitted use. I do not see fuel as a permitted or prohibited, and so would be my interpretation that would need special permission from ZBA, special exception. But that's just my interpretation.
That's the way I interpret it as well.
Okay. You've already identified the fact that the property backs up against residential properties on Marshall Road, and even though those properties are zoned the same as you are, they are, as you said, non-conforming. They were existing residences before the zone got changed, and they're allowed to continue as residences. And I'm not, obviously that's going to be a huge issue for those folks. And so, anything that you can do for mitigation, buffering, both visually and sound and otherwise, is going to be very important. The board is going to be looking for that in addition to the abutters. But I was looking at one part on the plan, Carl or Doug, and I noticed that it looked to me, especially along the buffer with those residences, it looked as though the vegetation that you were proposing in about a 20-foot wide swath. And you have it labeled as building setback. And then within that building setback, there are the plantings. I think if you look at our ordinance, you'll find that the vegetated buffer between dissimilar uses is larger than that. So something for you to, and you don't even need to answer it now. I just want to point that out to you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, are you something comes to mind. Is it a 50-foot?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and we had a question on that, but it depends on how you interpret it. But obviously, we'll work with you on that and the abutter.
Yeah, and that's something you can continue working with Glenn on as you come up with your formal submittal. But Glenn certainly is aware of that particular issue and what the requirement is. So you mentioned a possibility of a hydrogeologic survey study. If the septic system was of a certain size, and I think that you can probably expect the board would expect that to be done. And obviously that traffic is going to be a huge issue with this. This is clearly the largest project that has ever come before Kingston as a town or us as a board. And so we will take this methodically through the process and work with you as best we can. But obviously traffic is going to be a huge issue. And I think that whatever you come up with, you can probably expect that the board would would want to do peer review of that. So just be thinking about that and be anticipating it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So with that, if the board would like to ask questions or make comments, I'm just going to ask. I can see you all on the screen, so if you raise your hand, I can recognize you, and then we can take them one at a time. And once the board is set, we'll start walking through the questions that have come into the chat. Peter Bakey.
Just a quick question on that access road to 107. There was some rumblings possibly that was just going to be used for a emergency or fire road and possibly gated off. Is that true? Is that going to be open for full-time traffic?
Can I answer that?
Oh, yes, Carl, please. Yes.
Okay. We would basically, for safety and circulation, certainly it would not be our primary access point, but we believe that in any facility like this, we do need to have that backdoor entrance and exit. I think even on the plans, we might have even shown a gate, but the whole piece, the 800,000 square foot warehouse, is actually a protected, secure area with gates. But we really do need that access. It would not be just a dirt driveway or a fire road. We do need to have it paved and more formalized. We realize that there's an abutter there. We realize that there needs to be some separation. I believe we don't have to get into it now, but there's provisions in the ordinance and in the site plan regulations for access, and working on separation there too on that. But we would really need that access drive, and it would be a secondary driveway, not the primary. But we understand, and I'm hearing what you're saying about the need for that and the development across the street from that as well. And we want to be sensitive to playing out the trip generation, as Glenn mentioned, on how that just gets dispersed and managed on this site to make sure that people are coming and going where they're supposed to be and not overusing that back entrance.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Wow.
Robin has her hand up, I think.
I don't see it. Robin, do you?
I did, yeah.
Oh, she does. Go
So
right ahead.
there may have been a similar question from the public comments, but now I can't find it. So just in regards to the employees, that the 150, I'm assuming that's FTEs. So I'm wondering if there's maybe some subcontractor, independent contractor relationships, and if there's a sense of volume there.
Yeah, okay, Carl?
So the question was about the number of employees?
Correct.
Well, yeah, and sort of teasing it out a little bit, because there might be actual number of employees there, but there's probably going to be some other entities coming and going from the site.
Yes. Right now, what we're showing is basically a warehouse, and I know there's been talk about different kinds of uses. We're proposing a warehouse right now. I think what you might be alluding to is more of a distribution center, and right now we're proposing a warehouse with 150 employees, 3 shifts. If that use changed, and as Glenn pointed out, as we morph along with a final application, some of these things might change, but right now we are proposing a big warehouse with 150 employees. I think, Robin, you might be alluding to a slightly different type of use that's a subcategory of warehousing or distribution. And if it turned into that, then obviously we would need more employee parking. But right now we're proposing what you see on the plan, which is a big warehouse and nothing really more than that.
Okay.
Okay. Other items from board? I'm looking for hands. Lynn?
I believe that when the final application arrives, it should also have building elevations.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Well, it's
And
more
as
than
you
a
know, the-
suggestion. It's more than a suggestion, it's a requirement.
Okay. And the maximum building height by the ordinance obviously is 45 feet. So, I mean, if that changed, then we would have to propose something, that there would probably be a variance. But yeah, we fully expect to be able to put those prototypical elevations together for your review. And while you guys were talking, I'm looking at the zoning notes and site plan notes, and maybe Glenn can help or someone can help me on this, but I can't find it. I know it's here somewhere. The setbacks, the buffers and setbacks to, I think it's called a residential use of some sort or a residential district. I'm just trying to find the subsection of the ordinance that talks about that, because that's really important to us. And I know it's important to the neighbors, but we want to make sure we get that right. And I know, we'll work with staff on that, of course, but some of those areas are very important to us. So we just want to make sure that buffer provision is correct. This is to the residential uses, not the Little River. We heard you loud and clear on the Little River. I think we can make some adjustments on that and still perform on this. I don't know if anyone can help me on that.
So it is, and Glenn can point you to it specifically, Carl, but it is, that 50 foot does reflect the vegetated buffer between commercial and non-commercial uses, not the buffer to the river.
Okay, right. And under the site plan regulations, under 904.15, 904.15B10, there's a residential screening, and it talks about a parking lot. If it is located within 50 feet, so they recognize that parking lot, can be closer than 50 feet for a residential property, then you do, a number of things in the planting program for that. That's probably a subsection. I think there might be something else. I'm just trying to find it, but
I can send it to you, Carl.
Okay, good. And I think Lynn.
Lynn and then Ellen had something.
I believe that regulation is under C2, 109.8 lot regulations, letter D, setbacks, and it's number 2.
Yep.
And it says, new buildings shall be set back 20 feet from the side and rear lot lines. When property abuts a residential property, no portion of the development shall be less than 50 feet from residential lot lines. The required 50-foot vegetated buffer will be allowed within this 50 feet and shall be permanently maintained.
So the allowed buffer can be within the 50 feet, obviously. Yeah. So are you saying then, even though we're in the C2 district, if we have a property that's residential, and some of these are very large, massive properties with the houses on the far side of the property, and as a matter of fact, we have one property that the rear of that is very, very large. It's on the left side of the development there. We're holding the 20 feet, but in the back, I think it's lot 12. It's sort of a storage yard. It's more of a commercial look, very big, very open, but just a lot of stuff stored out there, and certainly not a residential use back there. So it doesn't seem to be fair to, if you have a very, very large piece of property that's 12, 15 acres, and the rear of that property is used for, it looks like, an outdoor storage area, and it's clearly not residential, just by virtue of having, it's residential because it has a house, a couple 500 feet away. It doesn't seem fair that we would, in the C2 district, have to abide by that, because that storage area is not a residential use. I don't want to get into, well, I guess we're not going to solve it tonight, but.
Well, no, and we shouldn't try to solve it tonight. We're just trying to give you some feedback. And
yeah, I appreciate that.
But I think you need to be aware of that requirement. And, when you come in with a formal submittal, if you feel that you want to argue for something less than that, you're welcome to do so. But keep in mind the magnitude of the proposal that you've got here and the effect that it's going to have on the neighboring properties. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Ellen, did you have something?
I was gonna say the same thing Lynn was, so I'm all set.
Okay. All right. Other board questions? All right. Well, we can come back to the board, obviously, but we probably should start making our way through the questions. Now, some of these might have already been answered, and if they have, we can sort of hit them quickly. But okay, now I caution folks when they put information into the chat that you needed to put your name and your address in here, and there are a lot of these that do not include that. So, and some of them are from multiple people, some of whom we know, and maybe we can make this work. But
I think we can, Mr. Chair. A lot of these are easy answers, and some of them are more difficult, and we would work on them.
Okay. All right. From Andrea Kenter, and I know we know the address. I just don't know it offhand. It's on Marshall Road. But
23, I think.
23 Marshall. Okay. Are the Zoom meetings being recorded? Oh, yes, they are. That was an easy one. Oh, and Peter answered that one already. It's also going out live in case anybody is interested. Here's another one from Ms. Kenter. We are that abutter with the pinch points, and we have a water easement to the little river that is recorded at Rockingham County Registry of Deeds. How would you handle that, Carl?
Mr. Chair, we are aware of that easement, and it is recorded at the registry. We show it on our existing conditions plan, and there's a corridor easement with rights to the Little River, which we would honor. And as a matter of fact, I believe on our plans, we even showed a sleeve for a potential access point, so that if the easement holder wanted to utilize that easement and get water out of the river, then they'd be able to do that without impacting a lot of the site at all. We would certainly accommodate that. That's a requirement to do that.
Okay. Another one from Ms. Kenter. What are your setbacks for the proposed USTs from proposed public water supplies and private water supplies?
There's standard regulations on that. Obviously, everyone knows. Andrea knows what those are. She's in the business. I think Doug, you can point out. There are some wrinkles to that, but Doug, you can answer some of those, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, so with any new system, any new, and UST is the underground storage tank, and I am assuming she's referring to the tank package for the gas station use. And basically you have a 500-foot setback from any existing wells, and we're meeting that requirement as part of our proposal.
And that would be 500 feet to a standard public water supply. And I think there's actually some setbacks that are less than that, depending on the type of water supply it is. And some
that's
that are
correct.
More. Yeah. But we would certainly meet the DES regulations on those.
Okay. The next one is from Terry Jamro at 35 Marshall Road. The question is the access road to Route 107 even needed? The proposed road is close to the property line and within the shoreline protection zone. I think you guys have already addressed that question.
Yes, it will provide more information on that, Mr. Chair. And we understand that that's a concern. We duly noted.
Yep. Ms. Kenter again, are the transient drivers counted as part of the 150 daily employees and therefore part of the count for the design of the subsurface disposal systems? Could you preliminarily discuss the anticipated traffic counts coming in and out of the warehouse on a daily and hourly basis? Okay,
so there's two parts to that question. One would be the transient drivers and the 150 daily employees. On a technicality, we would in the final design include transient drivers. I think Andrea has a point there. We basically just showed the 10 gallons per day per employee, and that has probably a safety factor of about 2 anyhow, 2.0, and maybe even more. But as we go into the design development on this, and to Robin's point, and exactly, you know, what kind of employees and how many would be at this facility, including transient drivers, we can certainly over design the septic systems for that. And if we had to, we can put pretreatment into those systems as well. So we feel confident that when we come back, we'll be including those flows as appropriate, to Andrea's point. The traffic, I think Doug can talk a little bit about that. We had a little gap, a gap in countability because of the virus and thing, and we started doing these counts, and then we had to stop because of the statistical relevance of the COVID corridor traffic that you probably saw. Doug, can you talk a little bit about what we would be expecting on that as we move forward?
Well, I don't think I'd want to elaborate on specific numbers as far as the use goes, just because I think we would need to have more detail specific to the type of use and how it operates, when it operates. But to Carl's point, there is some existing traffic data which was obtained regarding another developed site that was done in the vicinity of this project. So we do have pre-COVID traffic numbers that we'll be able to utilize. I think always the goal is to get, you know, the most up-to-date numbers. And so probably most likely some additional traffic count numbers would be required, at least in certain areas that maybe would be like the side street approaches. Those would factor a little bit differently. But I don't think we'd be able to speak specifically to volume numbers at this stage.
Okay.
All right, I'm in a hearing, I can't talk.
All right. I have one here from Scott/Terry, and I don't know who Scott/Terry is. Does Ellen or Glenn, do you know?
Maybe they could type something to you now.
Hey, this is Terry, 35 Marshall Road.
Last name?
Your last name, please.
Sorry, Terry Jamro, Jamro.
Thank you.
Oh, you had a question earlier. There we go. I got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. 35 Marshall Road. All right. Oh, did I miss?
I think you skipped.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped one from Mike Norton. Hang on. So Mike Norton at 49 Little River Road. Okay, well, he's making a big assumption there about who the tenant's going to be. He's indicating that large distributor's Fall River facility, which is similar in size, employs 1,100 people. This is according to their own website. Okay, it's sort of a statement, I guess.
We're not at liberty to disclose the ultimate users of the property at this time. If the final plan came in slightly adjusted to any particular user, to Robin's point again, that we would be adjusting that at the time of submittal.
Right. All right, back to Mr. Jamro's question now. For the shoreline protection zone, there are all trees now. Are the plans to cut down the trees, all the trees? Or are there plans to keep as many trees as possible, including a buffer of existing trees to the river?
And that's Scott and Terry, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, I think he's on mute right now, but
Well,
we talked earlier about this. We are going to be
Yes, that's
looking
correct.
at, okay, we're going to be looking at specifically that shoreland zone and specifically the buffer, and trying to make adjustments where we can actually still provide the facility and hopefully cut less trees in that shoreland buffer. There's going to be a balance there. We're kind of tight between the river and some abutters that want more buffers as well. And but I think we can work hard to keep more trees and around those sensitive areas. And I think we can do something there. Not sure how much, but we're not cutting all the trees, but we want to look at those shoreline zones and do the areas of the disturbances and the cut and areas where we're keeping. And the boards is going to be reviewing that with their reviewing engineers. And we heard you loud and clear on the intent, the elevated detail of a review of that.
Okay. Next one again, Ms. Kenter. Big question. How does the proposed drainage impact Kingston's MS4?
Well, we're under the AOT provisions for a private site development, and obviously the MS4 program incorporates that. We, as a general comment, and Doug can probably weigh in on this, but any municipality with their MS4 has a certain amount of responsibility to perform on their own packaging in their own umbrella of the town. We do not want to be a private development that's going to impact that. We will be delivering on our own project with the required EPA criteria and SWIP criteria, AOT criteria as well. And when Doug does and our team does the drainage analysis, we'll have design points on all of that. We're not going to just start dumping everything into river and taking erosion sedimentation with it. So we hope to be able to deliver on this project and not, obviously, not subrogate the town of Kingston's MS4 responsibilities. We have our own responsibilities, and we're going to take those very seriously.
Okay, thank you. All right, another question from Mr. Norton, 49 Little River Road. Okay, I'm going to read the question, but I need to preface this by saying that the detail he's asking in this question is really something that is going to be addressed when the full application comes in, because right now the detail he's asking for here, I'd be surprised if it's even available. So, but here's the question anyway: how many delivery vans will enter and exit the site every day? How many tractor trailers enter and exit per day? And how many employee vehicles enter the site every day? Carl?
Doug? I would say, again, at this point, I wouldn't even want to speculate on those exact numbers, just because those are items that are going to be buttoned down right to the specific number. What the way the traffic is going to be conducted, or the traffic study is going to be conducted on this project, is there's going to be trip generation estimates created by other facilities of very similar type, very similar size, and those numbers are adjusted and accommodated to meet our exact use. And then those numbers are put up against the additional traffic data that we have based on the existing traffic volumes. For the C-store, you may not see a massive increase in trips for a C-store such as that, because a lot of those trips are pass-by trips, which are existing trips that people, it's an opportunity trip. They stop, oh, okay, this is a good spot to stop to grab my gas as I go by. So you're not exactly creating new generated trips. Obviously, the warehouse facility with all the potential trips associated with those would be trips. And we would have those quantified. And that's really what lays out and with specifics lays out what's going to happen on the main road corridor to accommodate those volumes.
Okay, thanks, Doug. The next question relates to that question you just addressed. And again, it's a level of detail that that you're not going to be in a position to answer. It's from Michelle Mateo at 13 Brookhaven Road. With regard to Mike's question, what time of day with they also be running the trailers, etc., and what are you planning for controlling the noise?
This would be a 24-hour program. And go ahead, Doug, I'm sorry.
Well, I guess I would just say that I think this may not provide much comfort to the concerned abutters at this stage, but obviously when this traffic study is finalized, it will be submitted not only to the town, but also to DOT. And DOT does a full official scoping meeting where they review these numbers and they will decide whether or not they agree with the traffic engineer's assumptions based on how they've extrapolated up any potential numbers as to what we're going to be seeing for volumes from both volumes for employees and volumes for the tractor trailers. So those numbers will be independently verified. You know, we're not just making it up as we go. And then they will be agreeing or disagreeing with the analysis on how and what we're going to do to improve the corridor so that those uses can be accommodated. So, I mean, I think any traffic related items at this stage is a little preliminary just because we don't have that specific ironed out numbers for use of this size, but we'll be prepared to share those with the board on a formal application, and those would be reviewed by, as I said, DOT and the town.
And I think, Mr. Chair, that the second part of that question had to do with controlling noise. And we'll have to address that one way or another, even though the C2 district allows trucking terminals and warehouses. But we do have to be, and we have to address it one way or another within that framework of allowance. We have designed the site so that the most of that activity, the noisy activity, obviously, you know, the retail center is right out front on the road, and the security area coming in and wrapping around the front to the right, in between the buildings, and where that process takes place, we have that all pushed over away in the middle of the site there, and then the wraparound. So usually these facilities are spread out, but a lot of the busy areas are closest to the front door on the right side as we wrap around. And then we also have secondary areas wrapping around the back of the facility and then off to the left side. So we were sensitive to try to accommodate those extra slip areas all the way around to the left side, you know, to the abutters on Route 107. I know that doesn't probably answer the question, but we would be prepared to talk about noise in the context of it is a trucking terminal, it is an allowed use, but we're sensitive to that, and we'll work on that.
Yeah. Okay, Carl. Well, again, I'm going to go back to my statement that it's all well and good that you know, that the use you're proposing is an allowed use in the zone. You're also adjacent to some residential areas. So, you know, I think you are aware of it. It's something you're going to need to be taking into account as you develop your plans. The town
Yes,
also has a noise ordinance. So if you haven't seen that, probably worth taking a look at that as well.
Yes, sir. That's we do identify, we do at least acknowledge it. It's under section 407.2. You have noise standards measured at the property line, but that's actually the only noise standard you have on that section. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is to the rural residential district, which is way across the street. And then you know, there are decibel limitations and also hours of operation limitations that tie to those decibel limits. And so we would be addressing those as we move along through the design.
Okay. The next question, actually, it looks to me as if Bob Marley was answering a question. I think there was a question about what the development was across the street on 107, and it almost looks to me like he was answering it, saying that it was King's Landing. Am I reading that correctly?
I think there was another one by Mr. Norton before that.
Oh, sorry. I keep I keep jumping ahead. Again, Mr. Norton, 49 Little River Road, can you give us what the expected runoff is from this entire site with a typical storm?
So we haven't run the entire analysis to its completion because at this stage, I think that would just be way too excessive of an analysis point before we got some feedback from the town on this. But what I can tell you is the alteration of terrain requirements require two things: reduction in overall runoff rate and reduction in potential runoff volume. And so the plan, as I talked at length about in our opening presentation, is to accommodate both with what we're proposing on site with these ponds and through infiltration. So the infiltration practices will significantly reduce the volume coming from the site, and the large ponds will reduce the peak discharge. And so to be putting that in more layman's terms, we will not be putting any more water off of this site than what's happening today in its undeveloped condition. And that's a requirement that we have to meet. So that's why we have such a tremendous amount of storage areas, because this is a large development and there is a lot of area that will become impervious that was no longer impervious. But we can't discount the fact that there is an existing large area, although not impervious, during a large storm event would still have runoff coming from it. And that's why we have, rivers that get higher and whatnot during storm events. So we will make sure that we do not exceed the existing volumes and rates that we're seeing in this pre-development condition.
Okay.
And that's reviewed by the town engineer as well as the AOT people up at DES. And once we start on final design of what this project would look like, that we would be scheduling a scoping meeting on that with the state and invite the town to that meeting to make sure that all these criteria and the approach to the criteria and the data that we need to provide and everything are done appropriately right up front. And to Dennis's point on some of his initial comments, I think we're on the same page with those. Some of the initial looks that he had, and he just threw out a few of those. Those are some of the items we're going to be jumping on right away as well.
Okay, thanks. Now the comment from Mr. Marley regarding King's Landing. That's all it says. So I'm assuming he was answering a question there. Next one is from Laura Sanderson and Richard Gracie, 5 Brookhaven Road. Will there be noise pollution studies and the impact on the resident abutters and the wildlife?
I'm looking to see if Luke is still with us. I know that he initiated quite a bit of studies on this, wildlife, archaeological, and historic as well. There's 2 portions of this. We talked about no noise already, and we have to meet there's an ordinance for that. We're going to meet that criteria. And then the wildlife, granted it's a wooded site. We'll be working with Fish and Game on this as part of their review, integrated into the new regulations for alteration of terrain. So that would be embedded already on this, and Luke has already started quite a bit of that work. There's a certain amount of work that we have to do per the regulations, and we've already started that. So we'll be able to provide more information on that as we proceed with more submittals.
Okay. Next one is from, again, Michelle Permateo at 13 Brookhaven. What is the height of the buildings in regard to the tree line? I bought my house so I didn't have to see buildings. So there is a height limit in town, and you've already stated that, Carl. But I don't know what you're thinking about for the building.
Usually we'll put a GIS, an aerial together as well. For instance, for example, the good folks at 13 Brookhaven they'd want to know what they're going to be looking at, and that we can at least provide more of that information on the GIS plans and aerials and relation to from people's houses to the development, not only at Brookhaven, but around the facility, around the abutting area as well. There's a 45-foot building height limitation on that, and we would be at this point in time complying with that. If we can't comply with that, we'd have to go to the ZBA, obviously.
Correct. Okay, let's see. Well, a couple of these folks have been pretty active. We have another one from Mr. Norton, 49 Little River Road, regarding traffic. I assume he means, is this a 24-hour a day operation? You've already answered that. You said yes. I know that all other blank company, again, he names the name without us. I mean, nobody know, we don't know what the tenant is going to be, who the tenant will be, but he's naming one here. Sites are 20 hours a day, 4 hours reserved for repairs and maintenance. Is this the case here? Carl,
This site is, again, we are not at liberty to disclose the ultimate uses of the property at this time. It is a 24-hour site for the large warehouse, obviously. This is a warehouse. It's not a maintenance garage. It's not a repair facility. None of those uses would be part of the function of this site at all. No repairs, no maintenance. But I think that answers the question.
Yep. Okay. Ms. Kenter again. While allowed by current zoning, this proposal does not adhere in spirit with the Kingston Master Plan and what the residents would like our town to evolve into. I'm going to take that as a comment for the record, and unless you would care to respond to it.
Well, we all know what the Kingston Master Plan says. More of you were actually part of that master plan process, and that comes and goes throughout the years. So what's written sometimes is a little bit different than what was implied. But even if you take both, and in any large site development, we do reference the master plan. We've studied the master plan. We'd like your input on the master plan. We believe that we're actually delivering to the master plan for this particular site. I guess on any project, someone can take the master plan, and it's in multiple sections, obviously. It addresses everything, and that's by the master plan criteria in the state of New Hampshire for towns. And so while we would really hit it out of the park with many of the tax-based criteria, the C2 criteria, doing a good job on this, which would be an immense amount of tax revenue for the town. I mean, we're talking a very large percentage of tax revenue, even on the municipal side of the budget. There would be a really nice impact with no impact to the schools. Our intent would be to mitigate the impact, any impact to abutters or the environment. But if you want to get into master plan discussion, we'd be happy to engage on that. I don't think now is the time to do that because of the nature of the application. But I just want to go on record that we believe that we do adhere to the spirit of the Kingston Master Plan and the intent of the Kingston Master Plan. And I guess that could go on for a couple hours of debating, and Ms. Kenter would, be very active in that. We really want to deliver something that's a high quality to the town in accordance with the regulations and the ordinances, and indeed the master plan. And we believe that we can deliver that in working with the town to do this.
Okay. As I'm reading through these, and they keep coming in, so this thing's just scrolling and scrolling. And people are obviously they're concerned. They want to know stuff, but we really are getting into a level of detail here that, for the most part, would happen at the formal application levels. If, I'm going to read them, and if you can respond to them, that's fine.
I can go shorter on my responses too.
I'm not sure that at this point it needs very lengthy answers, unless there's one that you feel you really want to get into. So let's see, Michelle Permateo again, 13 Brookhaven. I am also concerned with the amount of lighting that will be required. How will you keep the lighting limited / lower to make sure it does not affect the natural environment?
Can I hit this? Yes, I just clicked that.
Carl or Doug? I know you.
Section 302.4 covers site lighting design. There's specific criteria for that on the lumens, on the dark sky compliance criteria. In the lighting industry, they have a very extensive dark sky compliant, their own internal design criteria for that, and the town ordinance subscribes to that. We would deliver on that. There is a mounting height on that, maximum of 25 feet. We could comply with that if we really needed to, but a facility like this, usually we go a little higher on that. We still be dark sky compliant, but if we absolutely had to meet that criteria, we've shown a lighting plan that meets that criteria, even though some of the bigger users recognize that you have a lot of little spindles out there, a lot of little 25-foot poles, but we could do it if we really had to. But there are, IESNA standards for all of that. There's criteria under 302.4F near wildlife habitats that we have to minimize and shield. So this lighting design would be not an afterthought that you normally see on site plans. Oh yeah, here's our lighting design, whatever. No, that this is more of a precise. So we started with the intent of doing that. We showed you actually 2 different lighting designs because we know it's important to you. It's important in the ordinance. And when we move into final design, we actually engaged already with a certified lighting designer that specializes in these types of facilities. So we've already engaged on that, and we'll continue to do that. And it's a good question. It's an important. I know you guys are going to be looking at that detail.
Yes, we will. Next one from Mr. Norton again, Little River Road. How many total cross docks are there in both buildings?
I'd have to count them unless Doug knows it off the top of his head. Give me a second. We're going to move on to some of the other questions.
I'm going to go to the next question because, again, it's a level of detail that we don't know if that's what this is going to be when you come in with a final plan. Peter Bakey, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a note, respectful Mr. Chairman, that some of these questions appear to be repetitive. We've talked about the lighting a few times, and possibly that's just going to save our time to address some of the questions that have not been asked. Seems like we've talked about a few things over and over again.
I hear you, Peter. I appreciate it.
We can skip those questions because we've already addressed them, is I guess what I'm getting at.
Well, it's public comment, so I'm going to read the questions. How much detail we get into, I think we could perhaps limit that if we've already covered it.
Okay.
Let's see. Ms. Kenter again. How would Kingston's current fire department even handle a building of this magnitude? Well, I'm going to answer that one because this is going to have to go through fire department review, and they will. They've already commented once, but once they see the final plans, they will clearly respond to that, and the applicant will have to be working with them because obviously if there's an issue there, the fire department's going to have the personnel and the equipment to handle that. So, okay, Mr. Marley again. King's Landing, he's at King's Landing, I see. Our concern is the entrance exit to Route 107. Is this entrance exit going to be used by truck, car on 24-hour, 7-day-a-week basis? 2, will you be improving Route 107 so drives, I assume he means drivers, can see oncoming traffic? 3, what have you set up to manage traffic management on Route 107? Exit entrance. 4, can the town restrict the use of Monarch's Way as a turnaround? 5, can you keep the 60-foot pine trees behind 23 Marshall Road? 6, is this a 24-hour day operation? 7, what can you do to keep the noise down? A lot of that has been addressed.
And we'll provide more detail on that now that we know that it's you know, a major concern that that secondary access, you know, we stated we do need it, but we're going to manage that access so it's not a primary access. But we'll be working on the plans, and we have a lot of comments on that. And from Bob to everyone, this is a good capsule of that, and we're going to get right on it.
Okay. Next one from Laura Sanderson and Richard Gracie, 5 Brookhaven. Will the traffic control light, I assume that means will there be a traffic control light at the 107 access? Don't imagine that we know that at this point.
Certainly possible, based on the warrants.
Right, and you don't have those yet, so you can't answer that question.
That's correct.
All right, Mr. Jamro, 35 Marshall Road. Would the 107 entrance be right across from Monarch Way? If not, I would think there would be a turning hazard with these being out of alignment.
We will look at that.
Okay. Ms. Kenter, this is addressed to Glenn. I don't know which Glenn, maybe me, maybe Glenn Greenwood. So would the 50-foot vegetative buffer be a requirement within that pinch point access out to Route 107? I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe Mr. Greenwood has the answer to that. Or maybe he would like to think about it.
That
We'll know-
requirement is found in zoning.
Say again?
That requirement is found in zoning, and so they would have to comply with that unless there was, unless they were going to ask for a variance from it.
Okay. Next one from Mr.
I would tend to disagree on that, but I don't want to get it split into hairs. But on 109.8D, as was pointed out by Lynn, there are some criteria there, but you have to define what a residential property is. And what if it's 100 acres and you have one house on one side that's 3,000 feet away? There are some definitions and some interpretations there where we'd like to meet with the town on and work on that. And we'll work with the town one way or another and the butters one way or another on that. But I guess that's all I have to say about that. I just respectfully disagree on the strict interpretation of that as a residential property, especially since it's existing non-conforming. That doesn't meet the spirit of the C2 district.
All right, I'm not going to get into
If we had one house on this 112 acres, does that make it a residential property? Then we have to have buffers amongst ourselves? No. The answer is no, and you know that.
And I'm really happy to talk with Carl.
The answer to that, Carl, is yes, you would, unless the board allowed you to do otherwise. And I'll let you work that out with Mr. Greenwood before it comes into the board.
Sounds fair. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Jamro, it looks like, what are the lighting plans at night? Okay, well, we have the lighting plans. Those have all been submitted. Anyone in the public can see those. I believe, Ellen, the plans are online, right?
Yep.
On the town's website, okay. In parentheses, parking, street lights, and building lights. We are concerned about light pollution. How high would the light poles be? You guys have already addressed all of that lighting stuff. I'm going to refer Mr. Jamro to the plans online. The other thing is that Kingston has a lighting ordinance which specifies types of lighting. Needs to be dark sky compliant. Mr. Dubé has already discussed a couple of different lighting options at this stage of the game. It might be completely different when they come back with a formal plan. Mr. Norton, is this not a potential distribution facility? Question mark. Well, we can't tell you because it's not been released for public information. We don't know, and the applicant is not telling us. Ms. Kenter, lot number 12 is a residential use. He has stuff, but it is residential. Yes, it is residential. Ms. Kenter, Doug, I would argue that there is nothing of the magnitude in the area to run similar traffic models, with the exception that the Walmart warehouse in Raymond, which has very different traffic patterns as they can immediately access Route 101. I'm just going to take that as a comment for you guys. Ms. Kenter again, wait, so as a residential location in the C2 district, we would not be subject to having the proposed development noise protection. No, that is not true, Ms. Kenter. Again, Ms. Kenter, as an Amazon, oh God, no. As a warehouse such and such member, could you give me a hint as to what the my delivery time may be? Carl, just curious as if you would like to live next door to, okay. We can, all right, the messages are still coming in here, and at some point here, I'm going to ask perhaps Glenn to cut off the comment, and because we're getting into stuff here that really isn't pertinent to this design review.
As I pointed out before, Mr. Chair, we've reached out to this abutter and she refused to talk with us, which is fine, but we were asked to reach out and we did in good faith. Instead, there's these kind of comments and social media postings, and we've been quiet and we're trying to be positive about this. And you know, it makes us, it's hard to do our job if, but you know, it's America. So we're going to be professional and positive and have an open door policy. But, you know, we're not going to be abused either. I can tell you that.
Ellen?
There does seem to be a comment by Mr. Paul LaLiberty that seems to be different than anything that's been brought up so far. That might be pertinent to Mr. Dubé, in that he's just asking, can you incorporate King's Landing condo development into your site plan so we can see how roads align to the proposed 107 access road? I think it just means the entrance to theirs versus where it is. I don't know if that's possible, but I thought that was different than what we had heard so far. I just didn't want that to get lost.
We can do that, yes.
All right, Ms. Kenter goes on with another comment, and again, regarding her residential property and, you know, rights and so forth. Yes, indeed. Mr. Norton, looking to answer the cross-dock question again.
We do have cross-docks proposed, and I found that in the notes when you guys were talking about something else. I'll find it again here. It's right here. On the proposed 800,000 square foot building, we have four flush access doors, 178 cross docks, and 395 trailer storage slips. And we have areas for circulation, access, queuing, and security.
Okay.
There are, on the existing warehouse facility, we are actually removing the docks along the south side of the building, and we're upgrading the docks on the back of the building. And I think there's about 13 to 18 docks on that back side that we would be rebuilding.
Ellen?
I'm sorry, I was reading some of the comments and I did not hear Mr. Dubé give the exact counts for that question that had just been asked. If you could just repeat that, so I have it for the minute.
Oh,
Just
the
remember.
cross-docks?
Yeah,
Cross-docks?
yes,
And again, this could change.
of course, the question was asked and it's hanging out there.
Yes, and it's actually stated and shown on the plan. So under, you can make reference to sheet 3 of the regulations compliance notes, site plan regulation notes under section 904-15B, subsection 4B under that. And it lists out 178 docks, and these happen to be cross docks. So in the industry, they talk about a cross dock being, and it's a standard for this type of warehouse, which is docks on one side of the building, and then there's also docks on the other, and it has to do with the operation inside the building and how that works. So they're across from each other on both sides of the building. And there's a total of, I believe, 178 of those.
Okay. Ms. Kenter again clarifying that she lives in CC2. No, it's not CC2. It's C2, commercial zone C2. And I will argue that we have retained our residential status. Yes, indeed you do, because you were already there as a residential use when that zone changed. Mr. La Liberty, 23 Castle Court. I think we already talked about that one, did we not, Ellen? And
Yes.
that's the one regarding showing the entrance to King's Landing, to show it at proximity to the entrance on 107. Another one from the Kenter household, Almus Kenter, will talk to you anytime. So there's another option for you to reach out to somebody there, Doug. Mr. Furlan, but it's signed Merica, and I don't have an address for them. They're concerned about home values, and are they just supposed to take it and be quiet about it? And then Mr. Marley, the King's Landing Board of Directors would be open to working with you on the Route 107 area. All right, I think at this point, I'm going to close public comment. That's the end of the list right now. And I think we've covered most of the topics multiple times in some cases. But I've got Peter Coffin with his hand up.
Yeah, I just had two comments. One, Doug was talking about the AOT regulations requiring recharge on site, but we also have town regulations for that C2 109.9 for lot coverage is normally capped at 35%, but up to 60% if the applicant can show recharge on site. So that pretty similar to the AOT requirements, except that you have to recharge all that runoff from the coverage area into the ground on site. So just want to make sure you're aware it's not just New Hampshire DOT, but AOT requirements, but the town requirement there, and that's 109.9. The second thing isn't for the applicant, is just wanted to check with the chair that whether the determination of regional impact was done and whether we notified Brentwood.
Well, we can't do that, Peter. This is not a formal application, it's design review.
Okay, but so that will come up before the formal application then?
When we get a formal application, we will then take up the question of whether or not it meets the criteria for regional impact review, in which case, if it does, the board would, if the board votes that that's the case, then it would be sent to the Planning Commission for their input as well.
All right, thank you.
But again, the reason we're not doing it here is because this is a design review. There are no votes, no decisions. It's not a final plan. And so that would happen at the formal application stage.
Right. And I'm pretty sure that Brentwood probably already knows about this since the state does.
I would expect so. Other questions from the board? Or from Glenn or Dennis?
I have no additional comments.
Okay. Carl or Doug, do you have any final comments or words?
We look forward to working with the board and the public. And we believe that we have a very high quality product here for the town of Kingston. And we look forward to providing more information, more detail on this. And look forward to working with you. I don't know if Doug has any comments. Or even Morgan has his mic shut off, but he's still there, I think.
I guess my comment to you guys would be, reach out as much as you need to folks at the town, to Glenn Greenwood in the planning office, to the fire department, to the police department. because all of those, all of those folks will have significant comment and input when it comes to the final design. So the more that you have worked with them and can address their issues up front, the better it's going to be when it comes time for the board to be looking at a final plan.
The design team has, I think, been very good about meeting with the town and asking for our input and including us in discussions with them, with DOT as well.
Okay. And we would look forward to participating in any scoping that you guys will be doing with DOT. So we'd be looking forward to doing that. Okay. I think then, seeing no other hands from the board or our staff, we'll close this public hearing at, we'll call it 8:45. And with thanks to Carl and Doug and the team for running us through this, and to the members of the public who took the time to participate on this Zoom platform. It's a challenge for sure, but obviously it's a way to get it done during this unusual time. So, well, thank you all very much. And Ellen, do we have any correspondence for tonight?
No.
No. Is there any other business then to bring before this body? If not, then I will call us adjourned at.
Wait.
Whoa.
Don't do anything yet. Wait. Glenn, where's Glenn? He's in here somewhere. Oh, did we need to talk to the board about anything to do with an upcoming meeting? I mean, it wouldn't be while anyone else is here, but necessarily, certainly they could stay as public.
Right.
Or do we not have to?
Well, we while everyone's here, I mean, I assume you're
Well, I'm
talking.
talking to the other Glenn.
I assume you're talking about some of the applications.
I hear parts of what you're saying. Yeah, but that's it. I'm
Oh.
sorry.
Glenn, you keep freezing up.
Can you hear me now, Glenn?
I can.
Okay. I didn't know if you had to talk to the board about anything that was coming up, or if that's just
No.
getting emails.
And now you've gone out again.
I'll write it down.
Chat.
Do you need to talk to us about any modifications to upcoming meeting schedules?
Yes, I tried earlier to speak with Doug McGuire because we need to not have him at our July 9th meeting because we've not been able to incorporate any review from RCCD or seen any revised plans. And it appears there are condominiums that are being proposed, and that slightly changes the plan that they already have provided to us. So I asked him to move that out to the 21st, but he and I have not been able to talk about it.
Okay, but so from
Luckily, I am here, Mr. Chair, if we want to talk about that right now.
we can.
I wasn't able to connect with Glenn today. I did get his email, and I saw I had missed a call from him. I had planned on emailing him back, but was prepping for this meeting and didn't get a chance to email him yet. With regards to Mr. Wilder's property, we were able to get Mr. Quintel's comments that he had given us, and in looking through them the last week and a half, we do feel that the majority of that isn't going to necessarily require any adjustments to the plans. There was a lot of questions that were related to parking, which I think we kind of handled, to the reclaimed asphalt pavement, and to landscaping, which, as we discussed, I'll plan on bringing an official waiver request to the board for that item. Obviously, we weren't able to handle the RCCD piece yet. But what I was going to say to Glenn was that I did feel that there was potentially still merit in holding the meeting, even if to address the potential waivers, so that we at least knew which way to go on those items. I can tell you that the owner, Mr. Wilder, when I mentioned that they were looking to cancel that meeting, he was pretty discouraged by that and wanted me to express our hope that that meeting could continue. Ultimately, that's your decision as a board. I think there was some discussion by the board that you wanted to try to work to assist Mr. Wilder in expediting this so that he could get construction started this season. And so for that reason, he does hope to maintain that meeting, but ultimately that's for you guys to decide.
Can I suggest that Doug, you and Glenn work this out, perhaps offline, and
Sure.
Glenn and Ellen can let the board know what it ends up to be. Ellen?
Just wanted to add that part of the issue is that there's a sign up that says it's going to be a condo, in which case we don't have condo docs, and there's no one has submitted an application for a subdivision, in which case we don't have a full application for the use of the site. The sign up on the property says it's for condos. And if that's the case, we need a subdivision and condo docs, and we don't have any of that.
That's
So
good.
you and Glenn can work it out, but that's one of the other issues that came up, is that there's a piece missing. But you and Glenn can talk that out. I just wanted the board to know it was multiple issues that you and Glenn are going to have to talk about and let the board know at a later time. We don't have to do it tonight.
Yeah, that sounds fine with me. I can work with Glenn on that. I will say that this condo idea wasn't a finalized piece when we submitted our original plans. There wasn't. I believe Mr. Wilder was contemplating the idea of breaking up the units to be able to sell certain units because it made sense to the business plan, but that wasn't a finalized piece. So he may look to continue this as not as a condo, and then could potentially come back to the board with an application to perform that subdivision and provide condos. I wasn't aware of any signage that he had being placed. Obviously, that can be confusing. But I'll talk to him about that and see how we want to handle it. If we're adding that in now at this stage, then I do agree that's an item that we would need to address with an application for the subdivision.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're aware of the issues, Doug, which is the important thing.
Yep, absolutely. And Glenn, I apologize for not getting back to you, but we can chat tomorrow and and come up with a game plan moving forward.
Glenn, did you hear that?
I did indeed.
Oh, okay. Okay. Ellen, was there another item?
Nope.
That was it? Okay. All right. This is the last call before I close this down. Going once. Twice. All right. We are adjourned at 8:50 p.m.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you all. Have a good night, and we'll see the board back here on next Tuesday. Yes, the 7th.
Tuesday.